Pat, I want to thank you for actually inviting me to do this. I really support everything that Pat does in terms of her work, but also what she does for the community. So when she asked me to do this, especially on networking, I was like, oh, really? Networking? And for her, I was like, absolutely, I will. So I thought it would be appropriate to have a title that says networking, heck no, or I'm in. So let's at least get a count here. Who are the I'm in people? The people that are actually here, right? That would make sense. Is there anybody that's like, heck no, but I'm like being forced? Okay, good, a couple of you. But you're forced to be here. I kind of thought when I asked that question, I would have three groups. I would have the I'm in, heck no, or it depends. But you guys were pretty even split, right? So what tends to happen is the people that enjoy networking are the people that actually tend to be a little bit more outgoing and a little bit more friendly, and then the networking is actually an opportunity to connect, right, and have fun, have food, and do all kinds of things. And then the other people that don't particularly like networking do it because they know that they're supposed to do it and it actually generates results, correct? So when I started my business almost, 12 years ago, every book I read on how to run a business and what I had to do for marketing talked about the importance of networking. So I remember one of the first events I went to was a chamber mixer. It was one of those evening type events. I didn't know a soul. I walked in and I felt like I was gonna hurl. And I watched my clock to see what would be the earliest amount of time before I actually had to leave. So for those of you who are extroverts and you're looking at me like, I don't understand what the problem, I know you guys totally get what I'm talking about. I vowed I was never gonna do networking again. The reason is, and I'll go through a little bit about different personalities, but I actually am a very high introvert. And so I'm also what's called socially awkward. You know, there are people that are like social butterflies, right? That they just have the gift of gab, they're very persuasive, they know how to make small talk. I have none of that. It doesn't exist. So for me to be thrown into a room full of strangers, now this I can do. Public speaking is fine because I don't actually have to have a conversation with you. And if you notice, for anybody that came in earlier, I stand behind the podium and I'm kind of meek, right? And a lot of times people wouldn't guess that I'm actually an introvert because I'm up here doing public speaking, but it's actually two totally different skill sets. If I know what I'm going to say, I have no problem saying it. But if you come up to me and say, how's your day? And I wasn't prepared for that, then good. I don't know how to respond to that. But I was forced to actually learn about networking in order to grow my business. And my business actually grew in terms of networking. So I started in 2006, went to my first chamber event, and then I went to BNI, if anybody has heard of that, and I was involved in BNI for a long time. I did a ton of training on referral networking and how to do intramursals and all kinds of things. So that's actually where I learned the skill. But what I thought was fascinating when I was starting to go to networking events, and I found that if I went to one networking event, somebody else would invite me to a different one, and then I would go to that one, and then I would go to that one, and then they would invite me to another one. And I was like, I don't know what I would do if I had clients. I have no time, because all I keep doing is going to all of these different networking events, right? So I had to kind of whittle down which ones did I think would work, and how could I actually maximize my time. So those are some of the things that we're going to talk about today. But what I thought was interesting in all of the reading that I had done, so really I am a geek because I read how to build a business, right? I didn't just go out there and schmooze, not, that's not my thing. And so nowhere in any of the books did they talk about the difference between different personality styles and how to effectively network. So I'm going to talk to you about networking, but I'm going to weave in what the differences are in terms of the personality styles, okay? You all have a handout in front of you. Basically 4 components of effective networking, and I came up with a cute acronym called SWAG. So if you all have SWAG, you will be greatly successful in your networking efforts, okay? First one is simplify your message. Now, when you guys all introduced yourselves, you basically said your name and then you basically said your title, right? What's really difficult in a networking forum is when the hardest question, somebody comes up to you and says, what do you do? So how do you respond? What do you say? What are some examples?
As little as possible.
Okay, so is that the actual phrase? Yeah, so what do you do as little as possible?
I laugh and they laugh. And
Correct,
we move on
because
from there.
you're good with small talk, right? Yeah, I'm not.
I'm accused of that, yes.
Okay, so then they laugh, and then do they say, no, seriously, or just creates kind of a banter?
Yeah, it breaks the ice.
Perfect. What else does somebody else do?
Actually, I'd like to do that as little as possible.
If you have the gift of gab and you're persuasive, it might seem like it's not work because it comes easy to you.
It's not work.
Yeah,
Kids.
but it would be agonizing for me. It would be a lot of work for me, right? So don't sell yourself short that because you're leveraging your strengths, you're doing things that you naturally love, right? What else does somebody else say when somebody asks them, what do you do?
Take care of people.
Take care of people? Good. Why do you say that?
Because I do.
So,
In all capacities at one, because I take care of people at home and I take care of people at work.
and then that's a nice neutral statement that piques somebody's interest.
Right.
So then the follow-up question is, well, how do you do that, right?
And that's when I go into my whatever their personality is. Whatever they're at. That's where I go in.
In terms of how they respond to that. Okay, so give me some examples.
So say, no, really, what do you do? When I say, well, I take care of people in the capacity. So if they're home health, I'll tell them that I take care of people with hospice, and I tell them what I do. If it's just a caregiver, I tell them about our caregiver coffee breaks, how I take care of caregivers for hospice.
So depending on who you're talking to, then you'll modify your message.
Exactly.
That's perfect. Who else does that? That is be aware of others. That's step number 3. A lot of times people don't know to tailor their message depending on who they're actually speaking to. One of it has to do with whether or not you're talking to somebody who is a potential client, a potential referral source, or just somebody that you want to get to know. The other reason why you want to tailor your message is because their personalities might be different. Anybody else have an example of when somebody says, what do you do, how you respond?
I also think it's the delivery. You know, I worked for Nielsen for many years,
Yeah.
and they teach you when you're talking on the phone to mirror the person you're talking to. So in your case, because you're an introvert and I'm very extroverted, I'm not going to
Come over the top.
right. I'm
Okay.
going to try to stay low key and meet your
Pull back its hat.
expectation
I appreciate
of how
it.
somebody is coming at me. You know,
Right.
Because otherwise you tend to push people away, you know, when you, like, for yourself, you're kind of quiet, and I am none of those things.
Right?
So I would want to be more low-key to you, because
Perfect.
I don't want to scare you away from possibly.
So if I said, what do you do, what would you say?
I would say that I'm a marketing executive for a small, privately owned home care company in Largo.
Okay.
And then
what is the response typically?
usually, oh, tell me more about that.
Okay, good.
You know, what do you do for...
That's how you want to
Yeah.
gauge whether or not you're intriguing somebody in that initial message and whether or not you're simplifying it. Because one of the things that I do, despite having trained all of this, if I'm not kind of on my game and mentally ramped up to actually go to a networking event and somebody comes up to me and says, what do you do? And I say, I'm a business coach. That is the end of the conversation. I mean, nobody goes, oh, tell me more about that. They go, oh, interesting. And then they just slowly walk away, right? If you say realtor, if you say attorney, those are done conversations. And unless they're looking for an attorney, and most people at a networking event aren't going there because they're looking to buy something. They're looking for people to give them business. So when you talk about what do, you want to have a very neutral, simplistic statement that engages people to want to learn more. And one of the ways that you can do that, I gave you some tidbits here, but use plain language is what I call kid speak. Does anybody have kids that are like 5 or 6 years old? Yeah? So if I were to ask, is it a son or a daughter? Winter, son or daughter?
Daughters.
Okay, so if I ask your daughters, what does mommy do for work, what would they say?
Oh.
And that's pretty much what you do, right? Would they get, like, help other people or care for other people?
Yeah.
They would, right? That's why that's a really good message, because a 6-year-old should be able, that's how you want to communicate things, is in the language of a 6-year-old. So if I started talking in my lingo speak in coaching, 6-year-old doesn't know what coaching is, right? Attorney, they might know the title, but they won't know what that means that you actually do, right? So there's, you want to think about how am I simplifying my message so that a 6-year-old could understand it? And the best way to find out if you've nailed it is to go and ask a 6-year-old. Tell them what you do and then hear what they actually say. I'll loan you my kids. Yeah. A lot of times what ends up happening is we want to come across as though we're the expert and we're knowledgeable and we're credible. So we tend to talk above people. Has anybody here ever dealt with a financial planner? They are. It's the perfect example, right? So they'll talk to you and you'll listen and you don't want to pretend like you don't know. So you just kind of politely nod. But you're thinking, I don't have a freaking clue what they're talking about. And then I'll have financial planners come to me going, I don't know why I can't get business. Well, because you're not engaging anybody and helping them understand how to help you or what you actually do. And if a financial planner can get a 6-year-old to explain what they actually do, that would be pretty good. So that's the second point. The other thing is to share something new or exciting. So if somebody says, how are you, or what do you do, you might just focus in on one area of something that's brand new, something that you're passionate about, something that you're excited about, because that energy will translate, introvert or extrovert, so that people will be engaged. So for instance, I've said the word coach a couple of times, but let me tell you one of the things I'm most excited about is I just finally, after being in school for 2 years, am ready to launch a team coaching program to help with self-esteem and bullying and accountability and all of that kind of stuff, right? So as I look around the room, I just saw several heads nod. I still told you what I am doing, right? Or what I've been up to. I still used the word coach, but all of a sudden it engaged you, right? What was different?
You said what you were coaching too.
Yeah, I gave some specifics. And so I gave people an opportunity to relate to that. But I'm excited about it too, right? So as much as an introvert can show enthusiasm, I had that, yeah?
And it's new, so it's like that would indicate that someone could ask a question like, how are you going to go about this? Where do you get your...
Right, so it creates a dialogue.
My son needs some
The
help.
dialogue.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
you touch on the emotional side
Right,
too.
exactly. It's a hot topic, teen bullying, so right away
Yeah.
I perked up.
Yeah.
Because my son went through it in middle
Yeah.
school.
Yeah.
So,
My granddaughter too. I just see this going through all of this
Exactly.
for her.
So if I just wanted to scrap this and we started talking about needs of children and bullying, you guys would all have something to say, right?
I'm sure we will.
So when I shared my message, the reason why I knew that would work is why?
It's relevant.
It's relevant and it would relate to a lot of people, either for themselves, for their family, or maybe they had heard a story. So when we look at the next one, describe a basic component of your business. This is where you want to start talking about the benefits and how you end up helping people. So I like the I care for people, wherever I go. That's an actual benefit. Now, I didn't actually describe the benefits of team coaching. I just gave you topics. I said self-esteem and bullying. But what would the benefit be?
A more confident young person.
You know how
Right.
to identify it, how to help, what resources.
Yeah, how to intervene. Well, what's the difference you think of a teen that's more confident than not?
They'll have
In their future what? Okay, so if I said, I'm so excited about this new teen coaching program where I'm going to help teens with confidence so that they are able to set more effective goals. Now it adds a whole other dimension to it, right? So when we look at our business and we break it down, there's different components that will allow you to stand out from your competition. Your target market, your credentials, even your experience. So one of the things I did with the teens is I zeroed in on a particular target market. You did that as well. Real estate for seniors, which was perfect, right? Your credentials. Does anybody here have something that makes them very unique or stand out from their other competitors? based off of, I don't know, some additional training or certain certification? Yeah, what do you have?
A certified dementia practitioner, a certified care manager, and a master's in public health.
Very good. So if you were talking about that and somebody was like, well, tell me a little bit more about what you do, that's one of the things that you want to educate people on, is what makes you different from everybody else. So if I start the conversation and I say flat out, I'm just a coach, and people walk away, that's no good. But if I continue a dialogue and it piques their interest, then my role at that point is to engage them in such a way that they learn more about me and I learn more about them. And so credentials or experience or target market is one way to be able to do that. It's interesting in this group because you're all in synergistic type fields, right? Are any of you competitors in this room?
There's some.
I thought so, okay. I don't know much about this field, so the title isn't representative to me, but I thought I heard some of the similar type things.
There's four of us in the room, 5.
In-home healthcare, raise your hand.
Home care, yeah.
Okay. So for you guys, I personally don't believe in competition. I just believe that I have to be aware of how I actually stand out and how I can leverage the other people that do things similar to me. Because sometimes there's other coaches that do things I don't want to do, and vice versa. And so then we can partner together.
Also, there's non-medical and medical home health, so we're not in competition with medical at all.
Perfect. So you've got defining features. So in an event like this where you're doing networking, and I'll talk about this on step 4, which is your goals. Your goal may be here for education, not necessarily for clients. You're not going to see clients walking around, right? So that's not why you came. But you might go to another networking event for the intent of actually meeting people who could refer you. So it's very important that as you share your message, you know what function that networking group actually has, so that you tailor your message to that. Make sense? Okay. So number 2, be welcoming. For me as an introvert, this was my best task ever. Because if I act like a host, where I greet people, I say hello, I feel like I have a role, I have something to do. And oftentimes I'll go to whoever's leading. Is there something that I can help you with? Could I do this? Could I do that? I'd also like to be the go-to person where people, if they have questions like, how long will the meeting go for? Or what happens next month? I like to be able to answer those questions. Since I suck at small talk, I might as well be able to supply people with similar things. So be welcoming. The other thing is get involved in committees, volunteer, and contribute to those groups. Why do you think that's so important?
Reliable.
Yeah, it shows that you're reliable. What else?
Building relationships.
Yeah, relationships really don't get built on a 30-second commercial. And a lot of times people don't want to talk. They'll eventually talk about business, but they don't want to right away. They want to get to know you first. And when somebody begins to like you and relate to you, then they'll do what they can to actually help you. So when you're on a committee or when you take on a leadership role, it allows you the opportunity to engage with the same people over and over in different capacities, so they get to see you as a person. And that makes a really big difference. Listen, obviously, huge. So I like that if you're a big introvert, you know how to kind of pull back a little bit, because if somebody comes at me over the top and they start talking really fast and they start telling me all these different things that they do, and I get the slightest indication that they're trying to sell me, I feel dirty. Like I want to be done with that conversation. And so the best thing that we can do is listen to what other people have to say and make sure that it's reciprocal.
Very important.
Yeah.
Very important.
And that goes along with seek first to understand. So if you're in a conflict, I know nobody ever has conflict with family or work or anything like that. But one of the things that ends up happening is we get mad, we get frustrated, we start blaming other people because of the things that they're actually doing wrong. And everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants their side of the story to actually be heard. So if you ever watch two people fighting, not one person is actually listening. They keep talking louder and louder and louder, hoping that the other person will get their message. And seek first to understand is from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's one of my favorites. And so if you take a step back and say, let me understand where they're coming from, where their needs are, then you'll be able to strengthen a relationship. So listening and seeking first to understand. So if you are in desperate need for business and you decide you're going to go to a networking event because you're going to try to sell people to the room, you're going to be far less effective than if you go there and say, let me understand what these people need. Make sense? All right. Third one is be aware of others, which is knowing your strengths, knowing your personality. I have a program that's actually called Mind the Matters. Anybody here familiar with DISC? Yeah. Okay, so this is a version of DISC that I created with my own language, and MIND is an acronym. So it stands for Motivator, Investigator, Nurturer, and Director. And based off of the 4 personality styles, how they dress, how they walk, how they talk, how they network, how they sell, how they engage in conflict, how they manage stress, how they manage time, you name it, is vastly different. Airports are lots of fun for me. And as Pat mentioned, the program that I'm in right now, my master's was in psychology and the doctorate is in human behavior. So I love watching people and understanding people, right? But there's vast differences between those 4 styles. So I'm going to give you a brief overview. If you guys want a cheat sheet that talks about the 4 different styles and what the strengths and challenges are, there's a note on your sheet where you can just text SURPASS. I think it's to 22828. It sends me a notification and then I'll send you the cheat sheet. So if anybody wants this information, just text that to me. So out of the 4 different styles, motivator, investigator, nurturer, and director. Motivator is your most extroverted, gregarious, big picture thinking, very persuasive, easy to get along with. The easiest way that you know those people or you want to spot those people, they have the gift of gab, first of all. They tend to be very positive, so they tend to be smiley and they tend to be upbeat. And they love the center of attention. So they'll tend to wear very bright colors and do different things to stand out. If it's a guy, they usually have funky socks. That's a new trend. He's got dark socks on. But he's got a lighter shirt on. Or if they have a tie on, the tie will be very striking with a lot of different patterns. And for women, you'll see women with trendy type of outfits, big jewelry, bright colors as well. And that the motivator is actually the opposite of the investigator. You're a motivator all over because you got the chunky jewelry, you got pink in your hair, it's very easy to spot what somebody's style is, right? Because being the center of attention isn't going to bother you. Somebody who doesn't want to be the center of attention isn't going to have pink hair, right? It's cool, by the way. I did do pink, but because I'm an introvert, I did it like underneath in the back. That was like as far as I could go. I really do like it though. And I started a nonprofit called Purple Starfish, and so I had done purple underneath for a while too. I might go back to that. Kind of like that. Anyways, so motivator is pretty easy to actually spot, very outgoing. The opposite of that is the investigator. So the investigator is your quintessential nerd. They're not good with small talk. They love data. They like doing analyses. That's me. I don't look the part, but I'm such a geek. I could tell you stories on how I'm such a geek. And so a lot of times the investigator tend to dress in kind of darker colors. They're very practical. They like to wear black and then mix match things just so that it is very easy. And what you'll notice at a networking event is the people that are investigators, well, they don't tend to show up, number one. Unless it's like a really good event, they're just gonna come up with some excuse on not to do it. If they happen to be there, they'll typically be there a little early and they'll be the first ones to leave. They're out of there as quickly as they can. So they'll go for whatever intent they went. They're highly efficient. They're in, they're out, and then they're on their way. And so the motivator loves big picture and the investigator opposite loves detail oriented. So what will happen is, if you ask an investigator, what do? If they think you're interested in what they're doing, they might get into all kinds of details that you're going to be like, oh my God, I'm sorry I asked. Whereas the motivator may talk a lot, but there'll be enthusiasm and energy behind it. So then you have the nurturer. The nurturer is what it sounds like. They like to help people. They're very patient. They're very pleasing. They're very accommodating. In terms of their dress, they tend to be a little bit more neutral. They like people, but they prefer smaller groups, right? They don't want to be center of attention, but they like the connection. So in a networking event, you'll typically see the nurturers a little bit off to the side in smaller groups. And one of the best things that you can actually do as a nurturer is buddy up with somebody. Although, don't just sit there and talk to your friend the whole night and not actually get to know other people. So that's the nurturer. The opposite of the nurturer is the director. Now, the director is your goal-oriented, loves to project success, loves to have control. They're there to get things done. Out of all of the styles, those are the ones that will have no problems trying to sell you at a networking event. They'll just come right out, and if they don't think you're interested, they could care less, they'll move on, and they'll go on to the next person. The good thing about directors is that they're all about goals, results, and actually getting things done. But if they can learn to adjust their style and be a little bit more patient, they'll get to know different people in the room. But you can tell the director because they tend to be dressed for success. Image is very important. So I'll have a nice watch, I'll have a nice car, all of that will be set up so that they get to project that image. Now that's opposite of the nurturer who feels like, I'm not going to do all of that just to pretend I'm a certain way. Either like me for who I am or forget it. And then none of these are good or bad in terms of the 4 different styles, right? They're just vastly different. But if a director is trying to sell to a nurturer, that's going to be a problem. And even in a networking event, a director tends to have very strong posture. They'll walk up to the person and they don't even know it, but based off how they look, they're intimidating. Just their eye contact is intimidating. And so a nurturer is going to just be like, I'm not even going to mess with that person. So again, if you want the cheat sheet, send me that text and I'll send it to you. And so the other thing is you've got to be aware of your own style and leverage your own strengths. So I know that I'm an introvert, but I also know that I grew my business basically 50% every year in the down economy. And I did a lot of networking. So I knew that it worked and it was effective for me. But I was never going to make myself have the gift of gab. How do you teach that? Can you teach charisma? I haven't figured out a way to actually teach it. So I had very different strategies that worked for my personality and that also worked for me being an introvert and what my strengths were. So for instance, has anybody ever done what's called the Strengths Finder with Gallup Management? That's like 100 times better than DISC. So on that, one of my top strengths is called individualization. And then I have another strength called relator. So if you look at the example that I spoke to you about in terms of team coaching, I used my relator strength to connect with you all, right? I didn't use it with small talk, gift of gab, being charismatic. I don't have that. That's called woo, winning others over. The individualization strength is the ability to see what other people are good at. So one of the things I do in a networking event is I have this innate ability just to see what somebody would be really good at, and I'll compliment them on that. Or I'll strike up a conversation with them on what they would actually be good at. And so I'm able to use my strengths, even though I'm an introvert, in a slightly different way. The other thing I used to do too, I used to do a lot of trade shows in the beginning. The reason is because I had a table, so I had a barrier, which was always nice. But one of the things that I'm really good at is I like making things pretty and I like decorating. So I would make a beautiful table display that was attractive to people. They wanted to walk over and see what that was about. And so I never had to go out and work the room. I just had to make it very appealing for other people so that they would come and see what I was all about. So you see how if you know yourself and you know other people, the strategies are different. I have a lot of issues with people that talk about marketing, and marketing has to be done this one way. I disagree wholeheartedly because I tried to do it that way, and I was not going to be successful in my business if I didn't learn how to leverage myself first. And so what everybody's marketing strategies will be, if networking is a component of that, your bigger marketing message should relate to what your strengths are. Otherwise, you're going to hate doing it, and you're not going to continue doing it. But another example of one of the ways I leverage my strengths, anybody know? Public speaking,
Yeah.
right? So I don't have to have small talk with all y'all, right? I just talk, right? And I give value, right? I give education so that people will listen. So that's my number one marketing strategy. And that's when you'll likely see me at a networking event, is when I'm the one that's speaking. All right, last one is to establish goals. The goal isn't always just to get business. Sometimes, I've had this happen to me once in a blue moon. I had a table at a women's networking event, and a woman came up to me and hired me as a life coach. That doesn't happen very often. Most of the time, people are going to investigate a little bit, and they're going to have to know you a little bit more. And in your field, when you guys are talking about high emotion, sensitive type things, those aren't going to be quick type sales. It's based off of that relationship where people actually have to know you. So part of your goals aren't just about how many clients do I get. It could be how many synergistic connections do I have? How many referral partners do I meet? It could be purely education. What am I learning that will help me and support me in all of this? I remember I went to this networking event one time, and this woman, it was a big event. There was like 150, maybe 200 people. And this woman was very proud because she had just gotten brand new business cards, and she had the full box, right? I think it was a big box. It wasn't like 50 cards. It was a big box. And her objective, her goal for that night was to hand out as many business cards as she possibly could. And I remember meeting her towards the end of the night, and she was elated. She was like, "It's been such a good night. Look, I've almost given out all of my cards." Where do you think those cards ended up?
In the garbage.
Totally in the trash can, right? So you really want to think about your goal in terms of some slightly intangible type things. Did I meet somebody that I felt like I could connect with? Did I meet somebody that we agreed to follow up and learn more about each other? Did I meet somebody that I could actually help them by one of my other contacts? And that's a way to follow up. Did I meet them and come up with a way that I could, for me, supply additional information or additional education? Those are all goals for me, not just about landing a client, because I know that each one of those steps gets me closer to landing a particular client. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So
And it works because Denise and I hooked up, and we met at a networking event, and she took me to St. Pete, where I would have never gone.
Hey.
Never gone. I said, if you get mad at me and leave me on the corner, I will have to call 911.
So one of the things that I do is I do buddy up networking. So I get one of my extrovert friends who literally just drags me around, and then I'm horrible about talking about myself and even bragging on myself. So she does that for me, and then I do that for her, and then we just kind of tag team. It's a great strategy. Fantastic. So in order to be effective in your networking, what do you have to have?
Swag.
Swag. Thank you.
Swag.
Swag. Even though I have none, you have swag. You'll remember swag. Do we have a little bit more time for questions?
Oh, I do have
I'm going to turn this on.